The Samnite gladiator, the oldest type, was named after the formidable enemies of Rome, who were also the originators of this gladiatorial form. This specialization, which arose in antiquity, was distinguished by the gladiator's equipment, which was modeled on the military panoply of the Samnites, a people who had long contested Rome's dominance in central Italy. They were typically equipped with an elaborate helmet, which could be plumed and visored, or sometimes lack a crest, a greave on the left leg, and armor on the right shoulder. They carried a large oblong shield and were armed with a long, heavy sword and a spear. The Samnites' protection was limited, as their chest was frequently exposed. Eventually, this type of gladiator was superseded by the Hoplomachus and Secutor, and the Samnite was no longer used as a type under the reign of Augustus. The Secutor gladiator, an adversary of the Retiarius, distinguished themselves by their helmets, which were smooth and rounded, providing no grip for the deadly net of the opposing fighter. This characteristic feature likely led to the Secutor's name, derived from the sharp gladius-like sword they wielded, specifically the Sica. In addition to this, Secutors were equipped with a large convex shield, which would become a crucial aspect of their fighting style. Historical depictions, such as the Colchester vase, showcase Secutors like Memnon engaged in combat with their adversaries, including the infamous Retiarius Valentinus. The Colchester vase, a significant artifact, provides valuable insight into the armor and equipment used by Secutors during battles. In this scene, the Secutor is wearing a protective garment on his arm, possibly a manica, which may have been a common defensive element of the Secutor's armor. Observations of the Colchester vase have suggested that the shield used by the Secutor is short and rectangular, which would have required them to rely on their agility and quick reflexes to deflect attacks. Furthermore, this shield design also limited their defensive capabilities, making them more susceptible to counterattacks. The helmet worn by the Secutor during battles is characterized by its visor, which restricted their vision through small circular eye holes, measuring only 35 mm in diameter. This severely limited their ability to assess their surroundings and respond to their opponents. The helmet provided excellent protection, but also hindered their auditory senses and vision, making it a double-edged sword in terms of its effectiveness. Additionally, archaeological evidence and reconstructions, such as those by Dr. Junkelmann, have shown that the helmets worn by Secutors provided excellent protection, but came with significant drawbacks. The limited vision and sound detection capabilities of the helmet forced the Secutor to rely on other senses, such as touch and hearing, to navigate their surroundings and detect potential threats. In terms of physical protection, the armor worn by the Secutor consisted of a helmet with a visor, defensive clothing, or a short greave on one leg, while the other leg remained unprotected and bare. This specific combination of armor and protective gear highlights the trade-offs made by Secutors in their pursuit of protection, agility, and combat effectiveness. The Hoplomachus, whose name derives from the large Hellenic shield, the hoplon, used to protect himself, was a heavily armored gladiator. His left leg was defended by a nocaria, and his helmet was majestic, designed to make the gladiator more imposing. This category of gladiators armed with short gladius was often mistaken for the Thracian due to similar equipment. The Hoplomachus could be distinguished by the rounded bronze shield and the long spear he used as a primary weapon. The upper legs of the Hoplomachi were heavily padded with kilted defenses, which compensated for the small size of the shield. The Hoplomachus fought against the lightly armed Thracian, echoing the historical conflicts between Hellenic hoplites and Thracian warriors. The Retiarius, one of the most recognizable gladiators due to his unique armament, was a light infantryman who made up for his lack of armor with speed and agility. Typically, he wore a metal or leather guard for his left shoulder, a white leather belt, and a gallerus, a bronze shoulder plate that protected the exposed left side of the head and face from a swiping right-handed head strike. The Retiarius' primary weapon was the trident, which was normally unique to his specialty. He also carried a small dagger, the pugio, in a 3 meters diameter net, the rete, with which he could ensnare opponents, trip them, or whip them. The weights attached to the net were like modern fishing weights, and if lashed with sufficient power, the net could blind a man. Around the perimeter of the net was a rope, both ends of which were tied to the wrist of the Retiarius. If thrown unsuccessfully, he could jerk the net back into his grip. The Retiarius' opponent was usually a Secutor or a Murmillo, and his strategy was to try to entangle his opponent with the net, and then attack him with a trident or pugio. However, if the net missed its mark, the Retiarius could use his dagger to cut himself free if his opponent tried to use the net to pull him off balance. In combat, the Retiarius' lack of armor made him vulnerable to attack, but his speed and agility allowed him to dodge and weave around his opponent's blows. If he won the fight, he would use his pugio to slit his opponent's throat or stab him. The sharp 3-pronged trident was not as effective for this purpose. The bone grip of the iron-bladed dagger in the Naples Museum of Archaeology illustrates that gladiatorial weapons were also decorative, not simply munition quality. In terms of rank among gladiators, the Retiarius was likely considered lower than the heavier types, such as the Secutor or Murmillo, although they were more or less an equal match for any other type. However, their successes against more heavily armored opponents were not uncommon, and they were often considered ambitious gladiators who were willing to take risks in order to achieve victory. The Thraex, a gladiator of the light category, first appeared during the time of Cicero, and was a popular spectacle. Thracians were introduced by Lucius Cornelius Sulla after his campaigns in the Balkans, also known as Thrace. These gladiators were characterized by their distinctive equipment. They wore heavy leather bands on their arms, thighs, shins, and breast, along with a small, round, or square shield, a short, curved sword, and a simple helmet. Their helmets were instantly recognizable due to the griffin representation on the crest. The Thracian helmet, or galea, often crafted from a single piece of bronze, had a flared brim joined by hammering and a rolled edge. The face was protected by hinged plates with a bronze grille over the eye holes, offering good forward vision but limited side one. A flange defense protected the throat. The helmets weighed between 3.3 and 6.8 kilos, significantly heavier than a legionary's helmet. The crest of the helmet usually featured a griffin sculpture, and small rings could hold elaborate plumes as seen in some Murmillo helmets. Such embellishments, including smaller feathers above the ears, were similar to those seen on military helmets of the period. Experiments with reproductions of embossed armor, based on Pompey discoveries, demonstrate that the armor was capable of withstanding a strike. The Thrax's weaponry also included a short, curved, or angled sword. The Thrax was often pitted against a Murmillo, a heavier class of gladiator whose name is possibly derived from a sea fish. This pairing, unusual as the Romans favored contrasts between big and small, shows the importance of the Thracian in the arena. The Murmillo gladiator, perhaps originating as an opponent of the Retiarius, evolved into a heavy specialist often pitted against the Thrax or even another Murmillo, a less common match-up considering Roman preferences for contrasting large and small combatants. The Murmillo's equipment closely resembled that of the Thrax, with notable differences in helmet design. The Murmillo's helmet featured a large dorsal fin, inspired by the Murmillos, the sea fish, which served as the thematic basis for the gladiator type, which can be confirmed by the fish motif on their gear. Helmets found in Herculaneum and Pompeii share a common design similar to the Thracian helmet, although a unique example in Berlin showcases a polished bronze finish with intricate silver and gold checkerboard patterns designed to shimmer like fish scales in the arena. This armor also includes a greave with similar checkering. Myrmillones were a development from the earlier Gauls and Samnites, who were lighter variations. Gauls were introduced during the time of Julius Caesar and gradually gave way to the Myrmillones during the early empire. The Murmillo was armed with a spada and protected by a large Gallic shield, a helmet with a crest of feathers, and a possible breastplate depicting a fish. Graffiti from Pompeii illustrates the recognition of Murmillos even with variations, such as one armed with a trident facing an opponent with a sword and smaller shield. While the common Western Empire featured 6 gladiatorial types, other specialized combatants existed in certain events. This could be hazardous to viewers, not just to rivals. Sagittari gladiators employed reflex bows capable of launching arrows over great distances. They would shoot at each other within the arena, yet audience members likely faced danger from errant projectiles. The Essedari, echoing British warfare, battle from Celtic chariots, called Essedium. Poet Marshall mentions a female Essedari, and encounters with wild animals appear documented. An engraved cap from Augusta Trevirorum, Trier, depicts a panther chasing a chariot with its driver. The Provocatores, designed as middleweight fighters, wielded a large shield and gladius. A cardiophylax, a chest plate secured by rear straps, offered protection. The Pompeii relief, 20 to 50 AD, displays one with this breastplate. The provocator helmet changed during the early empire, mirroring the Secutors, but later developed a bulbous design, seen on a Smyrna grave stele. The Paegnari fighters initiated matches in the Ludi schools, serving to prepare the public for the main event. They used wooden rudis, swords, and bodily wraps for shielding against attacks. Protective head padding might have been worn, however, the Pompeii relief lacks detail. Performances utilized cymbal, trumpet, and hydraulis, water organ music. Sculptures and mosaics throughout the empire, including one in the British Museum, show the hydraulis. The Paegnari thrived at the Colosseum Games held by Emperor Commodus. Dio Cassius reports that the emperor used the warm-up to present enhanced spectacle and attire. He rounded up Rome's amputees, fashioned serpent tails onto their limbs, and then clubbed them in a manner of a Herculean slayer of monsters.